Hey friends, I'm back again here with Seeking Our Spirit podcast. Got a great episode for you all this week here with my friend Byron Moffett, composer, professional musician, classical guitarist, and instructor. And he's got a great story for us. It was a great episode. Hope that you enjoy it. As always, if you want to be a part of the show, want to share a spiritual experience with us or tell your story, you can contact me anytime at seekingourspirit@gmail.com or on Facebook or Instagram or anywhere else. Seeking Our Spirit. Enjoy. All right, now yes, we are rolling. As I was saying before, I was excited to have you. Thank you for coming and being
pleasure.
a part of this. And yeah, I was reflecting on the fact that this show is sort of a glimpse into spiritual direction in a way, I think. And I was thinking about you and realized that I hadn't really thought about that before, but we have been doing direction together for, as we were saying, about 7-ish years. I don't know. You said 2015?
2015, yeah.
Yeah. So you had come back from England, moved back to Knoxville, 2015. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think we just sort of started chatting, It was sort of called it direction.
Did we call it direction?
I don't know.
We got into it. Well, I mean, that was one of the biggest turning points in my life. And there's in my life, there's very discrete sections of my life because of, I don't know, my choices I've made. And that was a big one. I'd been in Britain for 10 years, a little over 10 years, and then moved back to Knoxville, and it was a total reboot. And coming back, I hadn't lived in Knoxville in over 10 years, and I really had no community. I had no real friend base besides my family, which was a big reason I moved back. And I kind of dove in at the Ascension. I joined the choir, and at that point, I was going to quit teaching music and try to do some sort of personal coaching. I'm still confused as to what my plan was, but Jim Garvey, the music director at the Ascension, kind of reminded me why I played guitar. Huh. I mean, it took me back to my roots of classical guitar, and then that kind of permeated into all the different styles of guitar that I enjoy playing.
He reminded you intentionally, or he reminded you through what you witnessed in him?
He reminded me through, being in the choir. He's one of the greatest musicians I've ever worked with because his ear is so amazing, but also just experiencing music that I'd never experienced before. Mm-hmm. And it's because of my prejudice towards organized religion.
Yeah.
That I went to a Baptist college for my last 2 years of undergrad. I went to Carson Newman. And they made me be a part of the men's chorus, and I was so mad because I'm a guitarist and I'm a solo act. Yeah. And then before that, I was never in a choir, and because I never really regularly went to church. Mm-hmm. And but when I moved back, I was like, I got nothing better to do. And two, it took me back to studying music in undergrad and experiencing music inside this huge instrument, and seeing the choices that Jim Garvey made within the music, and being able to sing all these great composers that as a guitarist, you're just not able to, like Stravinsky and Haydn and a lot of composers that I really love that I'd never heard of, that write all this amazing choral music. And then he's like, oh, you're going to play guitar on this, piece, so get practiced up. And that was great, playing with a choir. And two is kind of coaching on how I needed to improve my performance. It just started this recommitment to classical guitar and specifically, And since in the past 7 years, I've gotten so much better. I've taken lessons. I've learned how to practice better. My chi-chi's gotten better because of it.
That's really cool. I never knew that side of the story in
Yeah.
terms of Mr. Garvey. So that's interesting. So, okay, spiritual timeline. What does spirituality mean to you? How have you experienced that in your life? Where do you start?
I start, for me personally, my spiritual sort of journey as I see it, it starts on July the 20th, 1997.
Okay.
And
now, before you go there, so you wouldn't name anything as spiritual, like an awareness or anything, relationship with higher power, none of that before then?
no, well, other than like my it's the same relationship I had with Santa Claus.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it was like,
now I lay me down to sleep stuff,
Yeah, I mean, stuff that seemed more like maybe a vague superstition or, yeah, there's some platitudes that sounded pretty good that I was half aware of because growing up, we never really went to church regularly. And when we did, it was like this alternate history that we don't talk about in school.
Yeah.
That it's like that, and I really never had like a historical perspective of when are you talking about? Like it just olden times. Now I understand it like much, much better.
And that makes sense. So yeah, that was.
So it's just a vague,
Right.
yeah, you're supposed to go to church.
Right.
And there's these rules that you follow when you do, and you better get dressed up,
Right.
and and look nice, and you go to funerals, and you go to Christmas sometimes, and then you go to Easter sometimes.
Right. Sure.
If the family's got their act together.
Right. No, I got it. Okay, so for
So
you, 97
that's it.
is.
And 1997,
You're how old? What are
I
you?
am 26 years old, and I had been sort of living life in a way that I chose for, I guess, since 87. So in September the 8th, 1987, I got kicked out of high school for being late.
Really?
No, not really. I was late that day, but everything I had done up to that point, and finally they were like, because the day before I turned 17, and they could do it. And it was legal for them to let me go. And the reason that's important, it's because like I always had this horrible discomfort of being myself, and I felt like I was just wrong. I had pretty strong emotions. I didn't understand the world at all, how to navigate school. I wasn't a very skilled student. I didn't develop study skills or organizational skills. I didn't think I was very smart because I wasn't a good student. And, and still today, I think it's really easy to send the message of like, if you're not a good student, you're not a good kid.
Right.
And so I had a horrible fifth grade math experience where I got behind, and this teacher dealt with that by segregating you from the class to where you're set apart and you don't get any more help until you catch up.
Wow.
And so this like totally created these beliefs that I thought that were kind of my self-worth. That the beliefs that I was a horrible student, I wasn't very smart, really just eroded any self-esteem that I had. Now I know I just didn't have skills.
Sure.
And that's the easy part, to build skills. But, at the time I was clueless. So I grew up in a very unstable household. My mom and dad had substance abuse issues. And I went down that road as well. And because, man, did the trick.
Sure. And it's what you knew.
Yeah. It was what was in the in my environment, and so fast forward to 1987, and I was like I was working in a restaurant, like I was tickled pink not to have to go back to school because it didn't work for me, like. Yeah. And so that kind of began this 10-year journey, give or take, of doing life, doing exactly what I wanted when I wanted. And so...
It's just hedonism.
Pretty much, yeah, it was. Now, there were like miracles that happened. Number one, I started playing guitar when I was about 12, but never practicing, just learning some things and then messing around, and always like writing stuff just because it was easier than figuring out other people's stuff. And then, but when I was about 17, I really started practicing guitar. Like nobody ever had to tell me to practice my guitar. And like, so I started doing that. And so if I had to say anything was spiritual, it was the motivation to practice this instrument, which I would under any circumstances. Yeah. And there were some pretty outlandish circumstances that I chose to put myself in. But I always played guitar, recorded, and wrote songs through this 10-year period. The miracle was that I was able to get good enough to get in bands and play in bands and eventually do a bit of like sort of touring and some professional recording. But my life was pretty much a mess. I worked in restaurants, and I was thinking the other day, like in the early 90s, I was working at the old College Inn on campus.
Nice.
And actually like making reasonably good money, living in this town where it's cheap to live, and like
playing gigs
and I was always broke. It was like it's crazy, like. But and it was just because like I didn't have any sort of home life. Everything was social, because I wasn't very comfortable at being on my own and quiet. Yeah. There was a couple of times where I had one long-term relationship, and then that was really rocky because I didn't have any self-esteem. I didn't have any framework for living, and so it was just this horrible codependent relationship that kind of played itself out. And then I kind of had other relationships, and like there was one that was with this really lovely girl who really liked me, who was super nice, and I totally didn't feel like I deserved that. I was so uncomfortable
because you weren't a good student.
Because I wasn't worth it. Because of that, and like so like I ended it. Yeah. Because I was so uncomfortable because she was so nice to me, and that's really kind of shows you where I was, and then so that kind of played itself out. I got to the point where it wasn't the craziest thing, but I played a gig with my brothers. We were in a band, and I
one of the highlights of my life was my band Blind Aggression. Opening for you guys.
Oh yeah, at the
Spot
at the Mercury, wasn't it?
Mercury Theater. Yeah.
This was a little later, and it just was horrible, and I just really disappointed my brothers, and I was done. And that night, I just had these realizations that weren't the kind of thoughts I had at that time. And the realization was, I kind of saw my dad and where he was, and like I realized it was never ever going to get better.
Now this is 97. This is the moment you're talking about. Okay, got it.
It was like 4 a.m. Couldn't sleep. Was really in that sort of like sort of midnight of the soul kind of thing.
Dark night, It's like an inbreaking of the spirit in a way.
Absolutely.
If you've never had any sort of moments of quote unquote spirituality in your life, and then all of a sudden have this what seems like an external almost thing, like a vision or a voice or whatever it might be, right? Yeah. An understanding, a clarity.
And knowing like I'm going to do this. And once that was this decision, this commitment, this vow to myself and to whatever else was there, at the point I didn't understand, but there was no going back. Like, never was there any thought of going back. Like, to this moment, there was no 180. It was only forward from that moment. And I took action from that moment. And which that is my sort of, I view that as like my spiritual infancy.
Yeah.
And so from there until where I sit right now, it's just bumping into things through discomfort and shoulds and oughts and what I feel I need to be or whatever. And it took the form of many different things. Number one, the deep desire to get a college education. Because I thought that, once you do that, you're sorted out.
Yeah.
That is it. And
another thing we're taught, right?
Another thing we're taught. Now, I will say, like, it's great for discipline. It's great because there's clear goals. And I needed that because I didn't get that when I was younger.
Right. And you learn some of those life skills that you didn't have, right? Time management and,
how to take notes.
Studying and notes.
Yeah.
Right.
And which you start by going in and writing verbatim
everything, right?
Everything, and then you get good at it because you stick with it. And so I began to disprove some of those things, but the other thing is like I'm quite the late bloomer, and so emotionally and just as an adult, like I was 26, 27 when I really started to seek to be an adult, and so my late 20s and 30s were kind of like my teens and 20s. And so I ended up meeting someone in around 2001 and then marrying them in 2003, which was, I kind of had a fear of always being alone, and I was still working on my self-esteem. I didn't feel like I was very desirable as a mate and all of that. And so when somebody kind of came along, I was like, I better grab on. And there were really good times and stuff. And we moved to Britain in 2004. And there is a huge line of demarcation. There's before moving to Britain and there's after, because the moment that I landed in Britain and got to the place that we were going to live, which is barely in London. It's like the most north you can go. And when I was over there, because my ex-wife was a social worker, so could get a work permit, and she's doing job interviews, and I'm in central London at the guitar stores, that has Eric Clapton's guitar, and and I'm like, this is London, and we land and it's North London, just a little sleepy suburb, really, and I'm like, I made a horrible mistake.
Now, was she from England?
No,
okay,
no, she's from here. But I knew the only way was forward.
Yeah,
again.
You had made this commitment.
I made this commitment,
not going back.
But I realized at that moment how hard it was and was going to be, and I went into a pretty deep depression for a while there.
Now, did that moment in '97 when you made that commitment, was that also recovery, or no?
No. Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
so that moment was there too.
That was it.
Got
yeah.
I just didn't know timeline.
And so, but that's you have to do this.
That's massive.
It is.
It's massive just for a person to just in terms of recovery, but to also be no, not just that. I'm also going to get a college degree, and I'm going to and all the other things, completely moving forward. That's a ton to commit to and to take on.
It is. Yeah. I totally agree. I didn't feel like it was at the time. I felt like that wasn't enough. I've always felt like, nah, this isn't enough. And so when I got the degree, it was, and then I didn't have a job. I was doing the same thing before I got my undergrad as after I was teaching guitar. At that, I was like, there was a huge letdown, and it was like it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And then I met my wife, and then we moved to Britain. And what was great is it did mean something, because there I got a job teaching guitar in schools. That was working for the council government, which is kind of like little counties within London, and the boroughs, like in New York. So I got a job in Harrow, which is northwest London, and worked there for 10 plus years, and struggled so much with that job because, number one, it's like highly skilled. Teaching is really highly skilled. Like, teaching is one of the hardest things that you can do. And if you have no skills, then it's really easy to kind of be a bully. It's kind of easy to revert to trying to control kids. And that's exactly what I did. And the first, for like 2005, 2006, I was just kind of like, kind of all over the place. Quite depressed. I ate a lot of really junky food, and gained weight, and then, but in 2007 we moved to central London in Islington, which is near, like, it's right in the middle, and it's amazing. And I got connected with some people, and finally had sort of a community of people. Actually, in May, Laura and I are going to go take a trip.
Oh, great.
With James, and stay with one of these friends that actually two of the friends that I met. Cool. That are both musicians and absolutely incredible people. But and that is where, and I met a guy that kind of mentored me in a way that was no nonsense. It was basically, here's what you do if you're an adult. Here's why you need a spiritual practice. And this is where I got much more clear in my spiritual life of, I have a spiritual practice to clear all of the stuff in my mind that is sort of degrading, and realize that I'm just as good, no better, no worse than everybody else.
Worthy, right? Yeah.
Worthy. Yeah.
What a gift in that guy, huh?
Oh, God. And he like literally, he would say stuff like, I'd call him up, I've ruined everything. And he's like, never say that to me again. Never call me up. And he's like, here's what you do. You solve the problem. And it's just like, I needed that, like, here, do this, not this, a directive. Because I was still so immature that I was like, oh, I've ruined everything. And the fact that I didn't yet realize that figuring out what my day-to-day truth needs to be, and standing up for that if I get sort of pushback from other people, that doesn't mean I'm wrong. And it doesn't mean I'm bad. It means that I might need to stand up for myself, but I need to check that stuff out and make sure it's right for me.
What a well, it's just, I'm just seeing a couple things. It's like, so that seems to be like, you've described this story. I don't think you named it in this way, but it's very clear there. Like, your school experience and home experience and whatever sort of set this tone of unworthiness, right? This perception of unworthiness in you that dominated your life. And then, like, it's almost like this spiritual journey, in a way, is a journey of rediscovering or understanding that you are worthy,
right?
Reclaiming that worthiness. And did this guy just fall into your lap? Like, what?
Well, I saw him speak.
Okay.
And I was like, that guy. Huh. He was an Australian guy, and just, I was like, man, will you work with me?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, and here are the terms. And I was like, absolutely, whatever.
Wow.
And it's just being open to somebody else's direction. That's why like your direction is so amazing, because I've got these plans and ideas, and in my head they're in my voice and they sound great, and, you know, but I'm not with those things. I'm not always taking like other people into consideration. I'm not thinking about down the road in long terms, and also like I'm not even thinking about, am I just trying to create more noise so I don't have to sit in what I'm feeling right now?
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the thing. I was so, I didn't want to sit in where I was right now, because it's uncomfortable and it's difficult. And
he forced you to do that.
He forced me to do that.
Yeah.
And the other thing he forced me to do was decide how I was going to have a relationship with my father, because there had been like a lot of estrangement and basically because of his choices. But he was like, you get to choose like how you're going to have a relationship, but you probably need to have a relationship. And so I really meditated and prayed on that a lot, and then came to the like realization that when I was in town, I would try to visit him. And if every now and then I'd send him a postcard when I traveled. And I did that, and kind of came to terms with all this kind of resentment and stuff that I had, because he was a less than ideal father. He was less, you know, he really had nothing. He really had problems in his childhood, much more than me. And he didn't really have it to give. And so, you know, I just kind of got to a level of forgiveness with him that kind of freed me. And it was working with this guy, and then it was also starting to not grab that crutch of resentment and anger to feel justified. And that's one thing that I find like justification and sort of moral outrage is this drug that just, if I get on it, I just can't get enough, you know? And it's like, so it's better to like not be outraged, not be resentful, because resentment
it's sort of like I don't know why, and I don't know if this makes sense when I say it, but it sort of becomes like a mask of worthiness, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not true coming from your core worthiness, but it's like I can put on the facade of worthiness,
right? Yeah,
because I'm justified, I'm righteous,
and it's because of this, and this. Don't look over here, because here I was not principled, and I didn't think about other people and all this. But in this, I'm justified, and because I was just think, and this comes to my mind all the time, because I'm always rationalizing doing stuff, and I feel like I need to be flawless in all of these things, and largely as a step parent. Like I need to be a good example, and but that turns really quickly into, I need to be perfect at this, and I can't make mistakes, and I can't be human, and I can't have, you know, human failings, and which is back to it's the other side of that unworthiness cord,
right,
or coin, and so, but like meeting that guy, it set this thing in motion that was, I began to exercise a little bit more. I began to get the itch to get some more education. I studied for a master's in film music, and that was really great. It showed me how to research, which I really enjoyed. And got to write some good music and get a master's without having to take the GRE, which was nice. And debt-free, which was even nicer. And but the exercise component, and then eating a bit better component, and then this amazing thing happened. I was friends with a guy in London. And he came, and he had these tickets to this opening thing, and his name was Richard, and he gave me one. He was like, come to this thing. It would really help us out. We're doing a launch, and it's at the BAFTA, which is like this where they have pretty much the British Oscars. This really nice theater in central London. And he's like, oh, you'd be doing me a favor. And what it was, and I was like, I'm supposed to play tennis, so I don't know. And so I was like, maybe I should go. And what it was the launch of Headspace.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah.
The meditation app.
Yeah.
And I had kind of tried to meditate in that. I tried to sit there real still and make my mind stop thinking thoughts.
That's what I was going to ask you is when this person sort of made you sit and made you have a practice, what did that look like?
What at the time it was like writing inventory. It was like writing down. Okay, you're so mad. Go write down why. Okay, and go write down like what the other person did. Okay, now you've written that down. Okay, let's see where you are in this.
Okay.
And so I began to see how actually I created the conditions for me to do this to make that person mad, and they reacted.
But so he was helping you actually get a practice of like processing your thoughts.
Processing,
and
yes.
Yeah, okay.
But I was still like wanting to like evade feeling it. And this, number one, this workshop was amazing in that when I sat with in this guided meditation.
This is back at the BAFTA, at the Headspace.
Yeah, with Andy Puddicombe on stage, who's an amazing guy, that I could sit there and I could feel it. And nothing bad happened. And nothing overwhelming happened. And actually, wow, that was 10 minutes. And so like I wanted it to be longer. And so what started was like I left that, and it wasn't an app yet. It just was this thing with cards. And so I started doing that, and just like every practice, haltingly doing it. But over the years, it became non-negotiable to where I would meditate most every day. It's still to this day, I meditate most every day. And so with the meditation, with the movement practice, with the diet getting better, I was starting to actually distance myself just through practice with my ex-wife. Our goals became quite different. And towards the end of like 2013 and 2014, things happened with the place we were living, and she wanted to buy a house and I didn't say no. And then the end of 2014, I'm in this house that I didn't want, and I've got to put in the kitchen and redo the floors, and then I realized that she doesn't trust me because of decisions I had made on a place we lived and frictions we'd had. And like, that was where I realized I'd been saying yes to something I needed to say no to. And then in 2015, that's when I had that another of those moments of, once I make a decision, there's no going back. And I decided to move back to my family and back to the U.S. And it's a very profound moment.
Yeah. Would you say that's would you couch that? You said another moment like that. So would you? I know that probably feels weird to say, like deciding to get divorced is spiritual, but like, would you describe that clarity moment in the same way that you did the 97 one of sort of almost external or an internal clarity, or a like I said, I keep using the term like an inbreaking, but
and I didn't have language for the spiritual experience I was having because through my meditation I knew I wanted more of just active love in my life. I wanted a community. And I didn't have that. Like my ex-wife was she's a great person, but she just didn't she wasn't very open. She wasn't emotionally connected. She was unavailable emotionally. And I just kind of realized
Which
that
worked for a time in your life.
It did,
but you started to awaken. It sounds like
absolutely, because it worked, because we would play certain roles,
right.
and if we played these roles, everything was good. But when I went out of them, and as I was growing, I would go out of them, and there was more and more friction. I realized that we could work this out in about a decade of therapy, and I didn't think that was right for me, and I didn't think it was right for her. And so I moved back with the help of my family, which was amazing, in 2015, and that's when I don't know, it's just it wasn't even a decision. I just started going to church at the Ascension. And then, like, I found myself soon after, I was there like 5 days a week doing something. And it was great. It was amazing, because I got to go through like the whole church calendar year and start to understand the seasons of that, the messages of that. And that was really great. Now, I would be sitting in the pew and something come up in the reading or the homily or something, and I'd just be grinding like.
That's how we started.
Yeah, it is.
You were like, I got questions.
And I'm just like, what's the deal with this? And why do we even have the Old Testament? You know, I think I asked you that one time.
Yeah.
And you're like, check into it. And so that was really great. Because I had the meditation, and I could sit with that and realize I don't know what's going on here, and I don't know why I'm so drawn to this place, but I was.
Yeah, looking from that, well, a couple things. One, I just want to, an aside, put a pin in. You mentioned like almost like the spirituality of health. Like, I don't know if you used those words, but I heard you talking about like dieting and exercise and you know, and becoming healthy was like spiritual. And just for what it's worth, it's funny because I'm literally right now for the first time sort of clicking with that. So just sharing that for what it's worth. I mean, it's been really within this past couple of weeks where that light bulb has gone off for me, of going like, oh, you know, I've always sort of tried to work out and be healthy and whatever, but it's never felt. There's all of a sudden this like renewed, like a joy of like, and I don't mean to sound like, you know, like so many like evangelical people will talk about like your body's the temple of God, you know, whatever, and like, you know, you should treat it well. But I actually like really connect with that all of a sudden. I don't know if it's age too, you know, but like going, oh, this is a gift, and you should care for this, and you should enjoy. There's just like this whole level of joy now, like when I have like a good run or like a good, you know, you feel your body and you feel good.
Well, there's nothing like movement and I truly believe that like it's no accident that we've got this hardware between our ears and this just miraculous body that can do all of this stuff. And so I used to be, but I'm not surprised at all when I'm moving the way that I love to move. And that actually is like when I'm playing guitar, I'm moving in a way musically, but also with my hands that is a way that I love to move. And it's like that flow state, you know, I think that's what the prophets talk about, you know, and that's where they are when they're getting like this direct line into God.
We could do a whole other episode on like music. Like you just said it beautifully because there is this unique thing that happens that we call like flow state or these other being in the zone, but it really is, as you said, like, so it's where you're making your body through whatever instrument you're playing. So you're physically engaging with or producing things that trigger emotion. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
but
totally.
It's like this convergence of the two. And that's just this crazy experience.
In my teaching with all my students, the thing that has come to me, like, because I always get asked in class, especially by kids, but also adults, it's like, when are we going to play a real song?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, please, first of all, give me your definition of a real song. And normally it's something like something I can listen to on my phone, you know, or something with a producer or something. And I'm like, yeah, but man, it's going on right now if we pay attention to it. And that's the thing. It's the vibrations of the music that get in our brain. And that's why we have, that's why every culture has some sort of music.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And every culture has some sort of music that's based on the pentatonic scale, which means this thing is wired into us.
Yeah, that's so nuts.
Like, listen to a great version of Amazing Grace and don't cry.
Yeah.
It's impossible because, like, there's something in there that's created
for it. The fact that every culture is based on the pentatonics, that's mind-boggling.
That's mind-boggling.
To me. Yeah. Anyway, well, okay. I just wanted to put a pin in that about the physical.
Yeah.
And,
no, I totally agree with that.
So, and the other thing I was going to say, and then we'll get back to your at Ascension, is as a person looking from the outside and then hearing you put this story in your own words, you had identified you wanted community and relationship and love. And so it almost feels like here was the most obvious, easy connection to community was in this church because your family connection's there and whatever, you know. So you just dive into that, and yet then you had to go through a process of confronting all of the past misconceptions or questions or whatever challenges that you had to organize religion. Right.
Along with, I'm at home at 45 living with my mom.
Right.
You know, I ain't got no job, you know, and like everybody my age has been working on their family life for the last 20 years and their career for the last 20 years. So, so what happened was at the Ascension, because the Ascension at that time, and still to a degree, is an older congregation. So I was spending time with older people that was a huge gift because it, first of all, showed me a lot of different people's religious practice, because they were there as much as I was, and like where your butt is, that's where your life is. And so if you're showing up somewhere 4 or 5 times a week, then that's a big part of your life. And so that was one thing. The other thing was learning about Christianity in general and Catholicism versus Protestantism. And that in the last 3 years is something that I've really, really looked into and listened to a whole lot of lectures on early Christians, that developed the Christianity as the state religion of the Roman Empire up through, Council of Nicaea, and then the church doctors that developed this, like all of these things are developed painstakingly by the greatest minds in Europe from 500 to still going on. And that tradition, along with a really deep gratitude for all the church music, because Western music would be nowhere without church music. So that was one thing that has really informed my spirituality now, which is based on Christianity. It was a really big thing when I met Laura, my wife, because of and I wear this on my sleeve, I'm the solo guitarist, like I'm the outsider looking in, and I believe because of that, and she grew up in the Presbyterian church, and always went to church, attends a Bible study, is really great, has a really great spiritual practice that I really admire.
Fish, though, so that's She did love fish, though. So
she does. She definitely. But like and in looking back, like we kind of had this moment where we kind of had the big, I don't know, argument or debate over how we're going to do this. It was early, and it was right after we got engaged, and I was pinning a lot of stuff on her that wasn't hers. And we had the really, really difficult time. It was a really hard time, but it was us seeing where each of us were spiritually and with regard to religion. And I just remember me being like something to the effect of, you'll never accept me because blah, blah, blah. Which is totally untrue, totally unfair. And it was me being scared to let down my guard and just say, I don't know. It's what I did. It was what I did in 97.
Again, right?
It's like, I don't know what's forward, but I'm all in for whatever it takes. And then when it's time to move back, it's like, I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm all in for whatever it takes. And this was that moment with Laura. Now, before I ever said like I love you to her, I knew that was a commitment. Like that means so much. That means everything. And so, but there was this it was a spiritual crisis that I was having and she was having, and we had to have coming together. And I don't know, I get chills just thinking about it, because this is the representation of our relationship. It's that we will always come together. It was just like, even when we disagree, especially when we disagree, we argue, and normally it's when I'm just totally like erratic and off the reservation for a bit, and then we come together and talk about what the real deal is. But this was something that, number one, it showed me I need to study this stuff, and then also, this person loves me unconditionally. Like two things, and that unworthiness, and then the fear of not being accepted and opening up totally. And
which is sort of a worthiness thing too, right?
Totally. That I'm going to be accepted for
what's the studying part, so that you can understand where she's coming from?
So we can have a common language. And what's happened is
because your religious language, even though you were involved with the Episcopal Church, was still so like not, you weren't raised in it, so you didn't have that language. Right. And then she had very much a particular language,
definitely around that, and a lot of that language, like I would get
rubbed you the wrong way.
And so I had to look into that and find out what that really meant. And now I understand what that means. Whether I agree with it or not. So the thing about the formation of the church, I find tradition is so important, especially in the Episcopal Church, because I mean, with respect, it's kind of like Diet Catholic. It's like it's the Catholic Mass in English, and so to understand where that comes from, I think is really important. Also, Protestantism, and how, like, to me, the Episcopal Church isn't really Protestant. It's like, it kind of is, but it's kind of not, The other thing is to really look at, I needed to read the Old Testament. I needed to read it cover to cover and really dive in and see that it's so much, it's Hebrew wisdom, ancient Hebrew wisdom, that is probably truer today than it was then. And it shows us how much man has changed, 0. and like how like something that is mythic in the sort of Joseph Campbell way is the thing that's always true.
Well, it's similar to what we were talking about music in all cultures being on the pentatonic scale. The things you witness in Scripture, when you get down into the core of it and don't just sort of get affected by the surface level stuff, right? Like, sort of, I remember you struggling a lot with, which most people do, like, well, who's this God that strikes everyone dead or does this or whatever? Yeah. But when you get down into the deeper parts of it, it's the same thing as the pentatonic scale. It's what you're saying, the Campbell, the archetypal, it's the story of all of us.
Yes.
Right? That is just constantly repeated and is written in all of our DNA. Totally.
Mm-hmm. And then coming to know the New Testament, the Gospels, I still haven't really read the sort of epistles all that much, but the Gospels, that is something like my sort of relationship with Jesus. I'm all in on how he lived. I'm all in on nonviolence. I'm all in for that. And then there's a few things that I just still have problems with. But the whole Sermon on the Mount, like all the wisdom there, and just a life of nonviolence, like that's the strongest, most fearless way to live, like that trumps everything. And to see how powerful that is. I mean, just that's something that has really changed my view of everything. And now the sort of
it's very interesting for me, just the spirituality coming through, like intellectually wrapping your head around organized religion. So does that click with you?
That does. Yeah, totally.
It's just it's a different angle. That's very interesting to me.
But in all of that, to where I really connect, not just in the head, but like in the heart.
Right, on experiential level.
On experience, it's like one really important sort of source has been reading Richard Rohr. Mm-hmm. And his assertion.
I literally was about to say, Richard Rohr says that mystic, it just means experiential.
Right. And I because he'll bring stuff up and I'm like, yeah, that was that there. Mm-hmm. And then, but what he says about, connection with God is through great love and great suffering. Mm-hmm. And so the connect to what you were saying about that question I brought to you is like, okay, how come bad things happen to good people, and how come there's pestilence and war, and it's these hard things like make us strong spiritually. And I wasn't ready for any of that. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't ready for letting down my guard and really saying, look, I don't know. I need to study this. Mm-hmm. And certainly wasn't ready for an openness to Christianity until I began to really experience love, and which for me is with my wife Laura.
Yeah. Well, you just look at the three main spots that you named today, and there you have two, at least periods or spots, moments of life of great suffering, where you, in those moments, were brought to our knees in such a way that it's sort of ego death. So you can all the stuff you couldn't quiet before, right? Intentionally, whether you like it or not, gets quieted because you're brought to your knees,
right,
in these moments.
Yeah. And
then there with the story with Laura is a moment of great love, right? And so you're able to shut off all that other ego BS,
absolutely,
because in that moment, great love trumps all that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that my sort of meditation practice isn't necessary now that I found love. Life is still, actually, my life is more full than it's ever been. But the difference here is, and this is one thing I consciously thought, and before I moved back, I was writing a lot of goals, a lot of things that I wanted to happen. But the number one is the things in my life, I'm going to, like, to the extent that I'm able to, I'm only going to say yes to the things it's either hell yeah or no.
Yeah.
It's like, and because of that, like, I know, like, everything in my life I've chosen. And when you were talking about the ego death just a second ago, I was like, yes, I did suffer. Life is suffering, but it's hard for me to think about that in that way because I suffered because of 100% because of my choices.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's letting me off the hook, but that's another thing of like, well, yeah, but let's be thankful for that suffering because it did take me to the points where I was willing to make a new choice.
Yeah, sure.
Through no fault of for no like virtue of my own. So maybe that can help me be a little bit more tolerant of and compassionate to somebody else who's doing the same thing. Because I have to say, I see my life through 52-year-old eyes of my experience and all that, trying to convey like what great advice to my stepson so he can sidestep like all of the stuff that I went through is impossible because he's not having any of it. And I'm like, no, here's what you do. It's like, and two, like looking back over some of my, especially my teens and early 20s and seeing how like just a couple of positive things could have made things a lot better. And hoping that he keeps those, like if you have a good like movement practice through those years, then like there's a lot of positivity that kind of carries over. Whereas I didn't really have that,
Right.
and
but you also didn't have anyone to model that for.
That's true. Yeah.
Where so that's something you and I go back to a lot in that topic of, I don't know that it has very much at all with what you say to him. It's
what you do.
How you live. Yeah.
Yeah. I try to remind myself like he's not going to hear it.
Well, one day.
And then I get mad at that, and then I move on.
I'm not worthy.
Yeah. But it's really interesting. Like, I don't know if you've been watching The Chosen. It's pretty good. What's really good is to see just the humanness in the New Testament, and also like in the Old Testament for that matter, because it's easy to be like these are hieroglyphs, like these aren't really people; they're just myths. But like to see. Like, especially like the apostles, like, first of all, you're following around somebody who like you believe is the guy, which is like one thing, but then after he's crucified, you're outlawed. You're on the run. Like these were people that chose to do this. And again, with the nonviolence and thinking of just about Martin Luther King, thinking about Gandhi and many other people who've practiced, nonviolence as a way of like moving forward, socially. That takes a lot of courage and commitment and devotion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one really cool thing to see.
So it feels like that this brings you up to like
pretty much, yeah.
Sort of story. What do you, in terms of higher power, God, spirit, in your day-to-day life, where do you see that happening, appearing? I mean, to me, it sounds like the themes, or as I always say, the languages, that God sort of uses to talk to you. It seems like you have these like in-breaking moments, right? Great love, great suffering.
Definitely.
Sounds like music, is sort of has been a language of some sort that has fed you and led you and guided you throughout your life.
For sure.
Sounds like you recognized the need for community and love in that way at one point. Meditation. So, I mean, yeah. And maybe you don't have an answer, but anything else you would name or?
Well, yeah, I would.
Yeah.
One thing that has really made a lot of sense to me is sort of viewing and it comes from Richard Rohr's book, The Universal Christ, which it's kind of this Christ is everything.
The cosmic, yeah.
Yeah, the cosmic Christ. And it like that has kind of informed my spirituality because to me, the experiential, like with regard to other people, and I feel like throughout my life, especially when I was paying attention, is God talks to me through other people.
Yeah, yeah.
If I'm alone too much, it's not good. Mm-hmm. Solitude turns to isolation pretty quick. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I'm a card-carrying introvert, so I need to mm-hmm. like totally recharge, mm-hmm. but it doesn't need to be too much. It needs to be enough. Mm-hmm. So in November, I rented just a little bed at Sewanee, mm-hmm. and just went there by myself and did some just personal inventory and did a hike. Went on Friday night and got there about 9 and just wrote until about midnight, and then fell asleep, got up, worked out. It was like 32 mm-hmm. when the day before was like 60. Mm-hmm. So I worked out, and then more inventory, did a hike, and then I was good. Mm-hmm. And then I called Laura and said, I'm coming home. I was going to stay another night, but I was like, man, I've done everything mm-hmm. I needed to do. I felt recharged.
Just like checking in, yeah.
And yeah, with myself. And I think I need to do that. But mm-hmm. and that's a really good time. Mm-hmm. A night and a day, and then I want to hang out with my wife, mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. have that connection. But that connection with her and the people in my life, it's like, that is where I get the message. Mm-hmm. There too, like, experiencing, of course, nature and how the world works and certain principles of, for me, my big system is music. And because music is endless, and just something with that much complexity is just, I see God in that.
Right, just in the magnificence of creation.
Of creation, in all forms of music.
Yeah. Well, and that's, not to dote on Roar, but that whole line of thinking, that cosmic Christ, what's helpful about that is people sort of do, like, I don't know. I think they have a hard time of understanding Christ as opposed to Jesus.
Right.
And so his using that term really helps you understand, like, oh, cosmic Christ being like God, right, as manifested in this historical person, Jesus. But then you follow him down that journey, and as you said, it becomes everything. And mm-hmm. so that's what's so beautiful about that is, like, spirituality then, as he says, mystic is experiential. So all of a sudden, there's nothing that isn't spiritual, really.
Right.
It's nothing is secular when you approach it from that way.
And
that's why I love, like, that's why this podcast, having these conversations, because I know that, and I believe that, and that's why it's so cool to get to sit and hear how every person experiences that holiness
Mm-hmm.
in whatever various unique different ways that they do
Right.
through their life circumstances.
And for me, it's that roominess, because I have a major problem that, like, some people that believe like 150,000 are going to get into heaven, and that's it. Right. And then, and it's like, and I also have problems with, if I was born in Baghdad,
sure,
I'd probably have a different religion. If I was born in India, I'd probably have a different religion. And there's really, and I've met people from Iran there was so much Christ in this person, and I've met people from like the Punjab and so the Bengali, and they were so nice, lovely people. And it's like it has to be Christ everywhere.
Has to be cosmic, yeah.
The other thing is, like, if Christ isn't everywhere, like, what do I believe in? Like,
right. What are we doing?
Then is that actually God? Then it's no. And me, and the real issue here is the sort of resurrection thing. I still have a lot of baggage over that. Not baggage, but just problems with how that works. And, one side of my brain is like, well, if you understand how that works, then, like, nobody else does. Mm-hmm. It's like, then, but that I don't understand how it works poses a problem. It's like, it's kind of like any God that I understand, I'm going to manipulate so it can't be God.
Yeah. And yet you just in this day, you've described two deaths and two resurrections.
Right. Totally.
In your life.
Yeah. In that way, dying to self, like, I totally get it. Mm-hmm. And that, and there is where I believe spiritually I'm connected to the scripture.
Yeah. The story, the truth of it. Yeah.
And I do also realize that I just can still bristle at certain interpretations, but also understanding his sort of what first century Jerusalem is like. What, like, we're talking about Hebrews, we're talking about Jews, we're talking about Romans, we're talking about, like, just knowing
context.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like those three moments, I'm assuming those in your life are the most powerful, quote unquote, spiritual experiences of your life.
Yeah.
There's no other, you didn't save a gem for me of another.
Well, I was referring to Center Court Wimbledon, but that's different.
Okay. No, that's cool. I just wanted to ask and make sure you didn't have another moment that you had wanted to pull out.
Well, there's these kind of mini moments.
Yeah.
And as a musician, like, I think, and they involve me and Laura. There was one when our first date, we were kind of set up on a sort of blind date by my younger brother Ryan and his wife Heather, and we went to La Paz, which I worked at La Paz in '87, and I'm still hooked on it.
That's a whole other story.
Still hooked on it. And I had just bought tickets to see Radiohead, and she had just bought tickets to see U2. And we were just meeting, and it turns out that we would start dating and go to both those concerts. And at the time, like, I was so into Radiohead. I still love them, but at the time I was like, and we went to the show, and we went to Atlanta, and it's one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. It was them, they were on, and they played everything, but I was with this person that I was falling in love with. Yeah. Like, I was totally in. And then we just had a time. Turns out the U2 tickets were much more expensive than the Radiohead tickets, but we ended up going to that in DC and went on this 5-day trip, visited my aunt in Annapolis, and stayed in DC. And at the U2 show, they started playing and came out with Sunday Bloody Sunday, and I started weeping. And I wept for like 45 minutes because they played that and then all of the Joshua Tree. And I was just like wide open because like I was here with this woman who I was completely in love with.
Yeah.
And they were playing the soundtrack of my life.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about my sister. I was thinking about all the stuff that I went through, but all the beauty.
Yeah.
And it was just this moment, and it was a truly spiritual experience. And it's just the fact that it was this band playing this stuff really, really well.
Yeah.
Really well. And I was just completely wide open.
It's a good moment.
But the thing is, it's like this person that I'm married to.
Yeah. You said it
affords me the opportunity.
Right.
To be wide open.
Right.
In whatever like I need to share.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. I hesitate to even ask this because just watching time and whatever, I don't want to go down a whole other rabbit trail, and I feel like you've said the things that you were meant to say. But I do think, like in music, I don't know. I guess I'm curious with you if you feel this way, but like you reminded me of it just in speaking of like connection and community with people, relationship with people, and that being spiritual, and then how music also does that. And for me, something I deeply miss is playing with other people. Mm-hmm. Because for me, there was always something there that when you played with another person and created stuff together or just jammed, like, and just went into the zone together, like that was just, and I just sort of curious with you, because I don't know if I'm right on this, but your talent and skill, because of your studies and because of your devotion to your craft, is so elevated that my guess would be that you probably had those experiences as a younger musician, like with your brothers playing concerts and things like that. But like, I bet now that's probably really difficult to find with other musicians.
No, I was just, and my mom takes lessons from me, and I was at her house and we were doing her lesson like earlier today, and she's played guitar. She played guitar before I did, mm-hmm. and I was like, "Now play something like you used to, like kind of the most comfortable thing you have, finger picking wise." And she played this thing, and it was 2 chords. And we had this musical moment that was, it was so good. It was so good.
That's awesome.
And for me, like, that's the magic. It's, yeah. I try to have it in every lesson I have. Now, with the kindergartner, it's not going to be as good, but I'm getting close. I'm writing chord progressions to where they're playing something and we're doing this thing. And also finding magic where the student is just playing open strings on the guitar.
Yeah.
And we're just working on rhythm, and I'm playing something that goes with it. And so I find more of that than I ever have, because number one, I'm always listening as a composer. Mm-hmm. And I like so many different kinds of music. And so like, I want to kind of write different kinds of music, but whatever comes up, there's something we can do with it. And so I didn't.
That's awesome. That's a great answer.
I would say it's the opposite, because before I was always like, is this right?
Yeah.
I never opened up to just listen to what was happening because I felt like I wasn't good enough.
Yeah. Ooh, there's a whole roar, first half, second half.
Oh my God. Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome answer, man. That's great. Yeah. I'm glad. That's really beautiful. And it speaks to just that's probably why you can do what you do. I mean, I'm going to steal that word actually for the purposes of these shows, magic, because that's another way to get at this spirit thing I'm talking about. Yeah. Right? Where's the magic?
It is the magic.
Where's the it? The good stuff. Cool. All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you doing this.
My pleasure. This has been great. This has been so fun.
A joy. And like I said, anything you want to plug anywhere? You still teach?
I do. I offer private lessons on guitar. I teach a little bit of bass guitar and a little bit of ukulele.
Where can people find you?
I've got a phone number, 865-583-9333. My email is ptmguitar@gmail.com. And also I'm a composer, so if you want any bespoke music, let me know.
Cool. Awesome, brother. Well, it's been a joy, honor, love you.
Love you.
And yeah, we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Thanks.